Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Once an evil servant entered the belly of a pregnant woman, this martial soul would be imprinted on the fetus body. However, the pregnant woman would die during childbirth, and her blood would nourish this evil servant, which would slowly take form in the fetus body. However, evil servants weren't considered very strong among evil soul masters. They were even considered one of the weakest martial souls. It was vastly inferior to the bone dragon, abomination, or skeleton king. This was also the reason why Huangjing chose to be a soul engineer in the Holy Ghost Church, and not a pure evil soul master. He wouldn't excel as an evil soul master. While an evil servant wasn't very strong, it was still considered an evil martial soul. It was mainly auxiliary in nature, and unleashed all sorts of soul skills filled with an evil aura to weaken its opponents, which indirectly strengthened itself. At this moment, Huangjing unleashed an auxiliary type soul skill of his evil servant called Darkness Descent. Within a certain domain, it would greatly affect his opponent's vision, and the sinister, evil aura from this soul skill would invade his opponent's body. The effect of his Darkness Descent was even greater at night. Indeed, Yi Gai suddenly felt everything turning dark around her. She seemed a little frantic when she couldn't see Huangjing clearly. She subconsciously retreated a few steps and waved her sword in front of her body. Although she blocked Huangjing's attacks, she was at a disadvantage right now. Huangjing revealed a cold smile on his face. His fifth soul ring also lit up. He was a very composed person. Once he gained the advantage, he would never allow his opponent to flip the tables on him. His 10,000-year black soul ring caused the surroundings to turn even eerier. Layers of purplish-black fog started to rise from the ground. This thick fog started to engulf Yi Gai. Yi Gai's movements slowed, and waves of sinister aura continuously entered her body. A yellow light projection appeared behind her, but this projection was already being torn apart by the purplish-black fog. Spiritual extraction. While it was an auxiliary-type soul skill, it was still a 10,000-year soul skill. It could greatly influence an opponent's spirit. If the opponent's cultivation was too inferior, his spirit would really be detached, crushed, and turned into food for Huangjing's evil servant. Huangjing normally attacked ordinary people. Those who suffered under his spiritual extraction would usually turn into vegetables after they lost their spirits. The light from his claws became even stronger now. Meter-long light blades shot out towards Yi Gai. "You want my life? You can die under my soul-chasing claws first. Without your flesh, I'll tear your spirit apart. The spirit of a soul emperor must be delicious. My cultivation will rise a few levels again." A mixed look of ferocity and delight appeared on Huangjing's face. To ensure that his strike was fatal, he even added a thick purplish-black layer to his claws. This was his second soul skill, Darkness Touch. It was a lethal poison filled with the element of darkness. Yi Gai was about to be killed. It seemed destined that the Duskwater Alliance was going to win this match, and by extension, the entire tournament. However, there was one person who didn't concur, Shangguan Weia. A cold and scornful smile appeared on her face. She knew who backed the Duskwater Alliance, and she was therefore prepared against evil soul masters. The Duskwater Alliance had prepared valuable and rare treasures for Hu Yuhao, but the Common Alliance had also prepared something. Yi Gai's actual body seemed to be in a daze right now. However, the tip of her sword suddenly shot upward before turning just as the claws were about to strike her. Suddenly, the 7 gold stars on her sword shone, and an intense golden light exuding a sacred white glow spread out. The purplish-black fog that was invading her spirit behind her screamed tragically. Instantly, the fog disappeared, and the surrounding darkness also vanished. Ding! Yi Gai's sword struck the center of Huangjing's claws, blocking them. The spirit behind her returned to its previous position as well. She also revealed a cold smile on her face. Huangjing's spiritual extraction was overcome, and Huangjing's evil servant trembled. His evil servant was directly connected to his own spirit. Although he wasn't hurt, he was also stunned. Following this, the sacred golden white light struck his body. Huangjing only felt a warmth engulfing him. Purplish-black fumes started to rise from his body. As his body shook tremendously, he screamed tragically and started to stagger backward. It was a holy light, filled with an aura of holiness. This time, even the vice leader of the Holy Ghost Church couldn't remain seated in the resting area. Holy light was the jinx of evil soul masters. Was Yi Gai's martial soul of the rare holy element? Yi Gai wasn't going to answer his question. As she stepped forward, she slashed her sword. At the same time, her fifth black soul ring shone. Her spirit received an enhancement, and her terrifying strength soared. A holy intent was revealed on Yi Gai's face. At this moment, her earlier disguises melted away. Yes, she was of the rare holy element. She was not even from the Common Alliance. She had joined this tournament to target the evil soul masters of the Duskwater Alliance using the Common Alliance. Evil soul masters were very adept at harming living spirits to increase their own cultivation, whereas a soul master, who possessed the holy element, like Yi Gai, was most adept at killing evil soul masters to strengthen herself. Yi Gai's holy look also moved Hu Yuhao. Her spirit had reached an extremely intense stage at this instant. The golden white light that she emanated illuminated the entire stage. Even the darkness in the sky almost seemed to be taken over. This is holy. The holy element was different from light, they were two different existences. However, the holy element was much more effective against evil than the light element. Yi Gai's right hand had turned completely golden white by now. A strong sword light also engulfed her sword at this moment. At the same time, two white, feathery wings appeared behind her back. She pointed her sword forward, and her sword light engulfed Huang Jing's body. Fifth soul skill, holy sword. An angel. Her martial soul was an angel. No wonder she was of the holy element. Angels were worshipped by sects in olden times. 10,000 years ago, the predecessor of the martial soul hall was the church. The church was very strong, because they possessed holy strength. At that point in time, there were many soul beasts with evil bloodlines. The church cleansed them, which earned them the recognition of the people. However, the evil soul beasts started to disappear, and the influence of the church started to wane. As they lost more and more talents, they were soon replaced by the martial soul hall. Yi Gai's huge golden white sword flashed past, and she stood arrogantly on the stage, alone. Huang Jing and his soul tool had both completely vanished. Hu Yuhao couldn't control himself when he saw this scene. It's indeed an era of heroes. The holy angel that has been missing for years has finally resurfaced. To a certain extent, a holy martial soul is an extremity. It's just that Yi Gai is too rash. Does she really think that the Common Alliance can protect her? Perhaps if she had the support of a strong organization like the Holy Ghost Church. Furthermore, she has underestimated how afraid evil soul masters are of her martial soul. I'm afraid. As Hu Yuhao thought to that point, his aura turned slightly cold. The vice leader and 4 elders of the Holy Ghost Church stood up at the same time. To them, a holy martial soul could threaten the very existence of the church. Hu Yuhao sighed in his heart. He could hardly look after himself right now. Even if he wanted to help Yi Gai, he couldn't. What should I do? At this point, the vice leader lifted her right hand and said, "Let's talk when the tournament is over." Yes. The 4 elders acknowledged her words immediately. However, they knew that Yi Gai was doomed. It wasn't just Yi Gai. Even Shangguan Weia could sense the sinister looks coming from the Duskwater Alliance. Shangguan Weia felt a premonition. Was I wrong to use Yi Gai to deal with the Duskwater Alliance? Forget it, the Imperial family is backing me. No matter how arrogant these evil soul masters are, surely they wouldn't dare to mess with the Imperial family. However, Shangguan Weia didn't realize that everyone had a bottom line that couldn't be crossed. This was also applicable to evil soul masters. Yi Gai was filled with positive energy. At this point, it was clear that she was the only one among the 3 ladies that didn't expose her skin. She pointed her sword towards the Duskwater Alliance, looking arrogant and scornful. The tip of her sword shook gently, and pointed towards Hu Yuhao's human-shaped soul tool. This girl doesn't know her limits. She's actually trying to provoke me. Hu Yuhao was a little speechless. She's really fearless. How can the Common Alliance compare to the Holy Ghost Church? I'll kill her to avenge Brother Huang. Hu Yuhao exclaimed. He rushed up onto the stage. As he charged up, he also blocked the 3rd elder, who was about to take action. As he leapt up, Hu Yuhao arrived on the stage once again. He took big steps towards Yi Gai. Yi Gai snorted, "Evil Soul Master, I'll definitely kill you with my sword." After killing Huang Jing, her cultivation had increased significantly. Her soul power that had been drained earlier had also been replenished. At this moment, she was bursting with confidence. Hu Yuhao sighed in his heart, but he still said, "I'll see whether you are capable of doing so." As the chief judge, Yi Yulin wore a grim look on his face right now. When Yi Gai revealed her holy angel, he was extremely shocked. However, he had the same thought as Hu Yuhao. What a foolish girl. Why did you reveal your holy element in front of evil soul masters, given that you're but a fledgling soul master yourself? Aren't you courting death? If I discovered your holiness earlier and referred you to His Highness, you'd have become a future trump card in dealing with the Holy Ghost Church. Wouldn't that be great? However, I'm afraid now. Yi Yulin shook his head helplessly. He had already thought it through. Those guys from the Holy Ghost Church are bound to do something now. Since this is the case, I'll do them a favor. Once Tang Wu can't hold on anymore, I'll end the fight. After all, the Holy Ghost Church is going to cause trouble, and I'll have to save Tang Wu. I can't let him be hurt by this holy angel. As he thought to this point, Yi Yulin formed a plan in his mind. He drifted up once again and shouted, "The fight begins." This time, he didn't even tell both parties to retreat. Since the tournament was already at such an intense stage, he allowed it to continue. Yi Gai's sword shook slightly, and she pointed the tip of her sword at Hu Yuhao. However, a subtle voice rang out in her ears at this moment. "How could you reveal your holiness in front of the Holy Ghost Church? Do you really think the Common Alliance can protect you?" This sudden voice caused Yi Gai to be slightly stunned. Although she wasn't slow, she started to become a little doubtful. Who's talking to me? Why does it sound like it's in my head? It's me, your opponent. As Hu Yuhao spoke to her, he quickly slid back and avoided her sword. Yi Gai laughed coldly and thought to herself. This must be another of the cunning tricks the evil soul masters are trying to play. It's not a plot. There are 5 strong individuals from the Holy Ghost Church over there. The 5 of them are all at least titled Doluor, and one of them is even a transcendent Doluor. Do you think the Common Alliance can protect you? At such a close distance, Hu Yuhao could use his spiritual power to communicate with Yi Gai. Within a 10-meter distance, he could almost read her mind. Of course, this was also because Yi Gai didn't activate her own spiritual power to resist him. Yi Gai pointed her toes to the ground, and her sword formed countless streaks of light. These streaks of light engulfed Hu Yuhao, but she was shocked as she thought to herself, "You can sense what I'm thinking." "My main martial soul is a spiritual type," Hu Yuhao replied mentally, "as long as you don't resist me too much. I can sense the undulations in your mind and judge what you're thinking." As he spoke, he performed his ghost shadow perplexing track using his human-shaped soul tool. His soul tool quickly retreated, and he avoided Yi Gai's attack. "Why should I believe you?" Yi Gai snorted coldly. Hu Yuhao was a little helpless as he said, "To be honest, I don't know how to convince you. However, I can assure you that the Holy Ghost Church is our common enemy. I'm more determined to get rid of them than you are. However, they are very influential, and it won't be easy. If you want me to prove it to you, I can only do so by defeating you before thinking of a way to save you." Yi Gai picked her brows and thought disdainfully, "You want to defeat me? It's impossible even if you're an evil soul master." Hu Yuhao felt very helpless as he replied, "Your pride will harm you. Grow up. Let's make a deal. If I defeat you, you'll listen to my arrangements. I'll do my best to protect you. You need to understand that your holy element is a great threat to these evil soul masters. They'll try to get rid of you before you become truly powerful. Okay. I'll listen to you if you defeat me." Yi Gai's face was filled with an arrogant look even though she thought that way. She didn't believe that she would lose to a cripple. She had been observing him earlier. She was stunned that he could create a human-shaped soul tool, but she didn't think that he was her match. Hu Yuhao stopped talking. As he retreated, he suddenly punched his fist out. Instantly, Yi Gai felt as if there was no longer a person in front of her. Rather, it was a huge mountain. A bright golden fist grew larger right in front of her eyes. A strong golden white light rose from her body. Her sword shot out light. As she pointed the tip of her sword forward, she managed to stab Hu Yuhao's fist. Ding. In terms of cultivation, both of them possessed ultimate martial souls. Hu Yuhao's soul power was still weaker than Yi Gai's even with the enhancement of his twin martial souls. However, his soul power amplifier now worked to great effect. As their soul powers clashed, a winner couldn't be determined. Yi Gai only felt an extremely immense spiritual undulation coming towards her. She felt she was going to be crushed by the aura of Hui Yuhao's sovereign's descent. Hui Yuhao's sovereign descent had already been modified, and was different from the original version that Elder Mu had passed down to him. It was also why Hui Yuhao wasn't afraid of letting the Holy Ghost Church's members witness it. At the same time, his sovereign's descent was still very strong even without the Goddess of Light to unleash it. The effect of the spiritual power in his sovereign's descent was far superior to that of his soul power, which represented the greatest difference from the original sovereign's descent. However, Yi Gai wasn't like Lan Ruoruo. When she opened her feathery wings, Hui Yuhao felt as if his spiritual power had encountered a holy barrier, and he was completely isolated. However, his fist also stopped Yi Gai's attack. He forced her to move half a step back. He exploited this opportunity, and his aura suddenly changed. A grayish halo surfaced underneath his feet, and his eyes also turned gray. A grayish soul ring. Yi Gai was also shocked. She had never seen such a soul ring. It's abnormal, and filled with an evil aura. It can only belong to an evil soul master. You're a liar. You're obviously an evil soul master, Yi Gai thought to herself furiously. Hui Yuhao was a little helpless as he said, if I didn't do something like this, do you think the Duskwater Alliance and Holy Ghost Church would trust me? Just remember our agreement, if I defeat you, you must listen to me. Be careful. It was obvious that Yi Gai's trust in Hui Yuhao was greatly diminished when he unleashed the aura of a necromancer. Her sword shook, and she opened her wings. Her feathers exuded a layer of gentle, golden-white light fog. She seemed to turn transparent from the intense light. She was filled with a thick aura of holiness. She pointed her sword forward, causing countless streaks of sword light to shoot towards Hui Yuhao. When they saw this scene, all the evil soul masters beneath the stage turned dismal. Even they felt slightly uncomfortable before this pure holy strength. Yi Gai was only a two-winged angel, but she was already very strong. When her cultivation grew to 7 rings, and she gained her martial soul true body, she might grow another 2 wings. When she reached 9 rings, she might even have 6 wings. When that happened, she would become a very strong enemy to the Holy Ghost Church. Furthermore, Yi Gai's appearance also disrupted the Holy Ghost Church's arrangements. If she won the overall competition, the Duskwater Alliance could only give up on controlling the rare metals in the Sun-Moon Empire. Although they were backed by the strength of the Holy Ghost Church, they couldn't do it forcefully. After all, Shu Qianran would support them no matter what. However, offending the military and nobility wouldn't tie in with the interests of the Holy Ghost Church, when war was getting closer and closer. It was now a matter of whether Hui Yuhao could win. The vice leader had already thought this over. Once Hui Yuhao was in a disastrous situation, she would try her best to intervene. Although she would offend the other 2 parties, it was better than completely losing face. What a strong holy light. Hui Yuhao was in awe. Yi Gai's holy aura made him feel as if he was immersed in warmth. However, this warmth was trying to corrode his body. If he were really an evil soul master, his abilities would be greatly weakened. Hui Yuhao quickly retreated and used his right hand to mimic a lifting action in the air. He continued to rely on his soul power amplifier to strengthen himself. A long staff appeared in his palm. The grey soul ring that rose from beneath his feet continued to shine brightly. Following this, it rapidly turned golden. As the golden glow surfaced, Hui Yuhao's human-shaped soul tool was also dyed gold. This gold was different from the gold of his sovereign's descent. This gold was much darker, but it was filled with an aura of light. At this point, Yi Gai and the evil soul masters beneath the stage were all stunned. Why is he filled with the aura of light now, even though he seemed to be surrounded by evil energy earlier? How did he manage to perform this trick? Just as the orthodox evil soul masters were all shocked, and the vice leader moved forward 1 step, a low-pitched recitation of incantations sounded from the stage. As Hui Yuhao pointed his staff towards the sky, a ball of pale white flame surfaced in the air. It quickly turned into a figure that appeared right in front of him. A white shield descended to block the holy light coming towards him. The vice leader stopped all movement when she saw this figure. It was Huang Jing's figure. However, his expression was very rigid at this moment. He seemed ethereal, obviously, he was in his spiritual form. However, Hui Yuhao used his spirit to block Yi Gai's sword lights. Controlling spirits had always been something that evil soul masters were very adept in. However, why was he filled with an aura of light earlier? Even the vice leader was confused at this moment. Yi Gai felt everything best. She discovered that her first soul skill, Holy Light Illumination, had lost its effect on Hu Yuhao when his soul ring turned golden. Her holy light was supposed to have an immediate effect on evil soul masters, but it was completely useless against Hu Yuhao. He blocked it with his soul power. While Huang Jing's spirit was crushed by her sword lights, Hu Yuhao was still offered some buffer time. Hu Yuhao was reciting incantations throughout this time, and his staff didn't stop moving. As he pointed it at the ground, golden bone claws started to extend up from the ground. They were reaching for Yi Gai. Yi Gai swept her sword out to crush them. She fluttered her wings and immediately rose into the air. Hu Yuhao swept the right arm of his soul tool forward. A streak of golden light flashed, and a few dim golden figures covered in a pale white glow appeared in front of him. They were tall and huge liches, wearing rigid expressions and completely disfigured. There were 7 of them, each holding a bone staff. After the liches appeared, they surrounded Hu Yuhao and made weird noises. At the same time, they lifted their staffs up high. Electrolux had once told Hu Yuhao that undead magic and necromantic magic were different and involved different abilities, but Electrolux had specialized in both categories. Necromantic magic generally involved 5 different components: incantations, poison, calling, darkness, and alchemy. Of these, Electrolux was most adept in the aspects of incantations and summoning. Combined with his in-depth research into undead magic, he had managed to make great achievements. Electrolux was also truly proficient in all types of summoning, as well as spiritual rituals. If Electrolux were still alive, he would be ranked higher than the Dragon Emperor Doluo Long Xiaoyao, who was an ultimate Doluo. Furthermore, he had once challenged an empire with his necromantic magic and destroyed it with his own power. Electrolux had achieved enlightenment following that deed, and later even performed a series of tests on Hu Yuhao's will before he passed his necromantic magic onto him. At the same time, he also helped Hu Yuhao solve many of the problems he himself had once faced. What he left for Hu Yuhao was a pure, light-type necromantic magic. It was invented by Electrolux, and also the reason why he added the word divine in front of necromancer in his title. Die. Just like the Holy Ghost Church's members had wondered if Hu Yuhao was an evil soul master, because of the aura of light that he released, Yi Gai also revealed a cold look in her eyes when she saw these liches. She lifted her sword above her head, and her second soul ring shone. A projection of a 6-winged angel flashed behind her. Her sword light suddenly expanded, and the blade of her sword became blinding. No one dared to look straight at it. A huge beam of sword light 1 meter long and 1/3 of that wide descended from the sky and slashed towards Hu Yuhao's head. Holy Ghost Slash. It was the second soul skill of her holy angel. When this attack appeared, Hu Yuhao felt as if it had locked onto his spirit. The terrifying beam of sword light turned into a longbow that descended from the sky. The 7 liches around Hu Yuhao finished uniting with his incantations. A golden slit suddenly appeared above his head, and a huge pale white head suddenly poked out from this slit. Accurately speaking, it wasn't a head, but a huge skull instead. Those who had watched the fight between the Tang sect and Holy Ghost sect in the Continental Elite Youth Soul Master Tournament easily recognized that it was the skull of a bone dragon. In addition, this skull was at least 5 times larger than the skull of the bone dragon that Yang Feng had changed into. An adult bone dragon. The evil soul masters immediately recognized what it was. Bright golden spiritual fire was burning in the eyes of this adult bone dragon. Strangely enough, it was filled with the aura of light. The golden spiritual fire was like liquid as it flowed down its cheekbones. As the skull moved upward, it let out a silent roar. A clear cracking sound reverberated out. The Holy Ghost Slash struck the dragon's skull forcefully. However, the holy light dissipated, and nothing happened to the skull. The spiritual fire was still burning. Suddenly, the skull opened its mouth and spat out a ball of dim golden dragon fire. After that, the skull receded back into the slit. Yi Gai hadn't expected her opponent to be so difficult. Her Holy Ghost Slash had no effect. When the dragon fire appeared, its assertive aura caused her surrounding holy light to become unstable. It was as if she were being threatened by a raging tidal wave. Although the fearless Yi Gai was a little reckless, she was still a genuine talent. In the face of such a situation, she still remained fearless. Her 5th soul ring shone again. She slashed her sword toward the dragonfire coming at her. The sharpness of her sword was indeed extraordinary. The ball of dragonfire was slashed apart, and the two halves brushed past her body. However, she didn't gain any headway from this attack. She even staggered backward a few steps and turned a little pale. Nice. The vice leader couldn't help but exclaim in the resting area. She was impressed. Fusion summoning, it's a very rare technique. The bone dragon earlier was extraordinary. Nangong Wan, you've contributed greatly to the church by discovering such a gifted talent. However, I'm afraid Tang Wu can't be your disciple. I'll report to the leader myself. Our previous guess might be right. He is the holy son of our church. Yes. While Nangong Wan was regretful, he was more astonished. Although his cultivation doesn't seem to be very strong, it's evident that he possesses great potential from his ability to call out an adult bone dragon. The leader was furious a few days ago when Yang Feng died. Although his abilities aren't comparable to Yang Feng's, his potential seems to be higher. If his calling were completed, he might have been able to call out an entire bone drago. If that's the case, he can even defeat a normal title Doluor. Of course, I'm afraid he'd have to be at least a title Doluor before he could do something like that. After forcing Yi Gai back, the 7 liches around Hui Yuhao also disappeared. He continued to recite his incantations, and a pale white door started to rise in front of him. Open, spectral door. Hui Yuhao finally shouted a phrase that the spectators could understand. After he summoned the door, Hui Yuhao walked through it and vanished. Following this, skeletal troops started to rush out from the door and charged towards Yi Gai. These skeletal troops all had a layer of gold on their bodies. As undead, their greatest trait was that they weren't afraid of death. Yi Gai slashed out with her sword. Every time she slashed it, some of the skeletons collapsed to the ground. However, her expression was turning more and grim. Her holy angel was supposed to be the jinx of evil creatures and soul masters. As long as she killed evil creatures and purified them, her own cultivation would be supplemented by the power of purification. As a result, her soul power would be restored, and her cultivation would increase. This was her greatest trump card. However, these specters really seemed to possess the element of light within them. They weren't afraid of her holiness. Her holy light wasn't very effective against them, and even if she killed them, she wasn't replenished. Were they really light-type undead? The skeletons only formed the first wave. After they appeared, countless liches also started to rush out from the door. Stronger skeletal horsemen also started to appear on the stage. They weren't strong individually, but they were extremely strong when they came together. They were unceasing as they all charged towards Yi Gai. Yi Gai lifted her sword, and her 4th soul ring shone. She lifted her wings before smacking them down forcefully. Suddenly, layers of holy light started to spread from her body. The incoming undead were crushed and flung back. Holy light spiritual formation. If these undead that had encircled her were ordinary undead, her holy light spiritual formation would have annihilated them. However, these light-type undead were too difficult to deal with. Not only did she not receive any replenishment, but the undead that were killed were only the skeletal troops at the front. The rest of the undead continued to advance. They weren't retreating at all. While Yi Gai was unleashing her killer moves, she wasn't replenishing her soul power. She was starting to turn more and more dismal. Beneath the stage, Nangong Wan complimented, yes. Tang Wu must be the holy son. A spectre that can't even be harmed by the holy element. It's too magical. Congratulations, Vice Leader. The Vice Leader was clearly very pleased with Hui Yuhao's behavior. This was definitely a very pleasant development to her. The fact that he was able to crush his opponent in this tournament meant that the Holy Ghost Church wouldn't need to fall out with the noble faction and the military, and everything would go according to plan. Moreover, the existence of a super genius like Hui Yuhao, who signified the descent of the Holy Sun, naturally left the Holy Ghost Church overjoyed. Do you finally believe me now? Hui Yuhao's voice rang out again in Yi Gai's mind. Yi Gai clenched her teeth. Believe what? Believe a wicked evil soul master like you. Hui Yuhao sighed softly. How do you still not understand what's going on? If I am truly that wicked, why are my summoned creatures not afraid of your holy element? If I truly wanted to harm you, would I even be bothering to chat so much shit with you? Look. As he spoke, the enormous spectral door suddenly grew even larger. Accompanied by the deep stamping sounds of horses, tall knights began to walk onto the tournament stage. These knights all wore deathly grey armor, and had faintly golden orbs of spirit fire pulsing within their helmets. The war horses they rode only had bones, but they were incomparably large, and left trails of golden fire behind them as they marched forward. Only 3 knights appeared, but the pressure that each and every one of them exuded was much, much greater than the spectral creatures that had previously appeared. After these 3 knights appeared, they immediately rode in 3 different directions. As though they had found their masters, the low-ranking undead creatures that had been previously summoned started to congregate in these 3 directions as well. Immediately afterwards, the undead became increasingly orderly under the commands of the 3 knights. As a result, Yi Gai felt an even greater amount of pressure. As a possessor of the angel martial soul, she had done more research on evil martial souls than almost anybody else. Naturally, she knew what these undead creatures were. These were death knights, undead creatures, which were naturally at the soul emperor level of power. Yi Gai wouldn't be afraid of a single death knight. After all, being a soul emperor herself, she was confident in her abilities to purify them using her angel's abilities. However, 3 death knights had appeared at once. Not only were they as powerful as soul emperors, they could even command the other undead creatures from the spectral door to form a true army. In reality, with Hu Yuhao's current capabilities, the unique martial soul that Electrolux had left him was no weaker than the combined strength of his other 2 martial souls. The reasons for this were very simple. The spectral demiplane that Electrolux had left him to conveniently summon from was one, but more important was his powerful spiritual power. In the world that Electrolux came from, spiritual power was the main factor that determined the strength of magic, as well as the duration that it could be used. While using his unique necromancer martial soul, his true strength was at the level of a soul sage. Furthermore, he was as powerful as an evil soul sage, to boot. This was an ability that he couldn't use in the open, but one that he could use as Tang Wu. At this moment, even the distant elder Xian was dumbstruck, much less the onlooking audience. He was also unable to comprehend how Hu Yuhao was able to use the abilities of an evil soul master, that were nonetheless filled with the element of light. Yi Gai's expression became increasingly uglier to look upon. She could clearly feel that her soul power was being depleted rapidly as she killed these spectral creatures. If this continued, she would be ground down by the large numbers of spectral creatures that she could easily beat in one-on-one fights. Furthermore, there was a question that was stuck in her mind: why aren't these spectral creatures afraid of my holy martial soul? There were no more undead creatures emerging from the spectral door. However, even the ones remaining on the stage left her in a very dangerous situation. The 3 death knights were coldly staring her down as they commanded their underlings. Moreover, they would occasionally fire out death lights to revive the undead creatures that she had already killed. It was like she had entered a never-ending cycle of death and rebirth. At the same time, a deep incantation filled with an aura of mystery once again rang out. This incantation came directly from the enormous spectral door, which was trembling violently at this moment. Large amounts of golden-green light started to roil about in the surroundings, and the spectral door was unexpectedly expanding yet again. Not good. Yi Gai's expression suddenly changed. Is he going to use an even stronger move? She knew that she couldn't wait any longer. She finally started to regret revealing her angel today. However, this regret only lasted for a brief moment before going away. If not for her extremely sturdy willpower, she would definitely not have been able to control her angel. Yi Gai proudly raised the long sword in her hand, letting out a sharp whistle as she did so. Immediately afterwards, the 7-star sword suddenly combusted. The sword, which was made completely out of rare metals, was unexpectedly starting to melt due to Yi Gai's holy soul power. Moreover, the holy golden light she emitted started to turn a golden red. An enormous, blazing ball of light appeared behind her, and her pure white wings started to unfurl. However, this new pair of wings wasn't as tactile as her previous ones. Instead, they were made of light. Even so, the undead creatures that were made of light were filled with fear, to the point that they were shaking in their boots. Even the Death Knights were left in the same state, no matter how hard they tried to resist. Yi Gai's pitch-black 6th soul ring slowly started to rise above her. During this process, her soul ring started to release the same golden reddish light that was coming from her body, before slowly melding into her. The longsword that had melted within her hands and the light coming from her body congealed together, forming an enormous sword over 3 meters long. It felt like the light coming from this golden reddish sword wanted to pierce through the heavens and earth itself. Yi Gai made her move. She took a step forward in midair and whirled around, causing the enormous sword in her hands to dance about. The four angelic wings behind her flickered with light, making her look ever so beautiful. This was her sixth soul skill, angelic dance. By relying on the strength of her martial soul, Yi Gai was able to forcefully bring herself to a level of power near that of a soul sage's martial soul true body for a short period of time. The holy sword in her hands had transformed into a holy sun sword, and any undead creature it touched immediately turned into dust. The three death knights quickly grouped up and charged fearlessly towards her. However, they couldn't even last 3 seconds against the holy sun sword before being vaporized by its terrifying light. Below the stage, the title Doluor from the Holy Ghost Church started to reveal expressions of panic on their faces. Their evil martial souls were actually starting to tremble slightly due to this young girl, who wasn't even a soul sage. It was no wonder that the angel was known as their greatest nemesis. This was way too powerful. Once she slew the last death knight, Yi Gai fiercely beat the four wings on her back. A vast amount of holy light surged out from her body, and with her hands gripping her sword, she leapt into the air. The golden red light from her sword filled the sky, and she launched an incomparably powerful slash towards the enormous door of light. Her tender face was filled with an unwavering look of determination. At this exact moment, the light in a 50-meter range surrounding Yi Gai and the spectral door started to twist, causing everything to turn blurry. Nobody from the outside world could see what was going on the stage. Only Yi Gai could see, to her astonishment, that an enormous pair of golden eyes had appeared within the enormous spectral door. Right after that, she felt an extremely powerful force slam into her tenacious spiritual world. Her petite body trembled, instantly depleting nearly half of the strength contained within her angelic dance. A golden figure walked up to her. This figure was extremely elegant and pitilessly beautiful, and was filled with a boundless amount of light. There was no deathly aura present on this golden figure at all. Her long hair fluttered about behind her, and her pure golden body seemed to be filled with a boundless life force. Furthermore, Yi Gai unexpectedly sensed a holy aura coming from her. This was a holy aura that was somewhat similar to hers, yet was very dulled down in comparison to her own. In an instant, this golden figure slammed into her. Yi Gai's aura instantly dispersed. At that moment, she finally believed Hua Yuhao. Nothing of what Hua Yuhao had previously said had made an impact on her. However, it was impossible for anybody to falsify a holy aura, much less an evil soul master. Even a faint trace of it could only be produced by an extremely pure person. Hua Yuhao's voice once again rang out in her head, "Do you feel it?" "Yes." "Good." The two conversed for an extremely short period of time. Right after that, the arena underwent huge changes. The originally twisted light within the arena suddenly became clear. Countless thick chains attached to sharp sickles shot out from the violently trembling spectral door. On the other hand, the previously incomparably powerful Yi Gai was now floating in midair. Her body was covered in a deathly grey light, and her pupils had dulled. Her back no longer had 4 wings, but 2. The thick chains and sickles pierced through her body, firmly locking her in a prison of chains. It seemed as though she had completely lost her soul, and the fresh blood trickling from her body evaporated into countless streams of greyish-black air. Suddenly, all of the thick chains pulled back, dragging her body into the extremely terrifying spectral door. The spectral door finally shut. The instant it shut, however, it seemed to transform into a ghastly and sinister mouth that started to chew loudly. The entire field was completely silent now. An absolutely overwhelming number of people felt absolutely horrified, and started to sweat down their backs. A crack appeared in mid-air, and the spectral door subsequently vanished quietly. Amidst the flickering light, the 2.5 meter tall metallic figure once again appeared on the tournament stage. At this moment, the stage was completely silent. The metallic figure stood proudly, but everyone looking at him felt as though he was filled with a sinister aura. They couldn't help but lower their gazes as they looked at him, not daring to look directly into his face. Moreover, the pupils in his mask that were originally flickering with a dull, golden light had turned blood red. "Is there anybody else?" A ghastly voice rang out from his mask. This voice was eerie, ice-cold, and contained a sort of pressure that could intimidate one's soul. The entire field was silent. Even Yi Yulin, floating up in mid-air, felt his face twitching. Even at his strength, he'd suddenly realized that a few traces of fear had sprouted in his heart towards this unfathomable youth. An evil soul master, he's actually such a powerful evil soul master. Just why is a genius soul engineer like him an evil soul master? Yi Yulin was feeling pained due to the inner struggles in his heart, but he knew that the Holy Ghost Church would definitely not give up on an evil soul master like this. Furthermore, he wasn't willing to take in an evil soul master as a disciple. Suddenly, the sound of clapping rose up. Hu Yuhao looked towards the source of that sound, and what he saw was a pair of grayish-blue eyes filled with an otherworldly sense of beauty. Moreover, the owner of this pair of eyes was the vice leader of the Holy Ghost Church. Right after she started clapping, the other 4 elders from the Holy Ghost Church started clapping alongside her with fervor and passion. The crowd in the arena was extremely large, and only the 4 of them clapping was a strange sight, indeed. However, this roused the awareness of everyone else present. He had won. Tang Wu, who was representing the Duskwater Alliance, had won the Radiant City Elite Soul Engineering Tournament. Yi Yulin landed on the tournament stage, and looked at Hu Yuhao with a complicated look in his eyes. He suddenly felt an urge to drop the Sun-Moon Divine Needle in the sky to eradicate this fellow in front of him. This person was a genius soul engineer and a genius evil soul master at such an age. Would the Empire truly be able to control him in the future? Moreover, just how greatly would the Holy Ghost Church flourish in the future with a genius like him in the younger generation? However, Yi Yulin didn't dare to do so in the presence of the 5 evil titled Doluor, who were staring intently at him. What Hu Yuhao had revealed to the various powerhouses was talent. However, there was still a great difference between him and these titled Doluor and Class 9 soul engineers when it came to power. Yet, he was able to rely on the mentality of the masses and the evil soul masters, along with the 3 underground powers, to control the entire situation. The evil soul masters had become his protective umbrella. An indifferent smile started to surface on the face below the golden mask. So many pleasant surprises had occurred today. Hu Yuhao was especially pleased with his performance today. He finally felt as though he had truly understood the various abilities that he possessed. After all, he was still a youth. He was inwardly screaming to himself, "Call me the ever-changing Hu Yuhao." The Duskwater Alliance's Tang Wu wins. Yi Yulin's complicated gaze finally returned to normal as he stiffly announced the result of the tournament. On the other hand, the instant this result was announced, the Alto Chamber of Commerce and the Common Alliance, who were originally displeased, were now completely silent. Unexpectedly, no one jumped out to contest the results of the tournament. This video will end here.